Garima Mohan of the German Marshall Fund for more. Garima, Pompeo and Esper are in India, but this is as much about China, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this meeting comes in the backdrop of Chinese aggression at India's border regions, which shows no signs of abating. It also comes in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic that is leading to a lot of questions in India about economic dependence on China, the role of China in international organizations. So China is definitely a factor. But let's not forget that this meeting is also a culmination of U.S. India ties, which have been growing stronger, not only over the last 4 years, but also since the early 2000s, I would say, when India and U.S. signed the civilian nuclear deal. So this partnership has been going from strength to strength. China has definitely accelerated these trends.
The U.S. stands to gain a lot by building closer ties with India. Delhi can serve as a counterweight to a rising China. But what does India stand to gain? Isn't having an antagonistic relationship with China only going to make things more difficult for India?
The Indian foreign minister recently, when asked about whether India will choose a side in the U.S.-China competition, said India will choose its own side and will work for its own national interests. So that's an important frame to keep in mind. Successive Indian governments in the past actually have been quite mindful of Beijing's sensitivities when it comes to India's closeness with the U.S. and have even pumped the brakes on U.S. India ties. However, India has been increasingly disappointed with China. Despite several high-level summits between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi, there have been so many roadblocks to India-China partnership, including China's closeness with Pakistan, its growing influence in India's neighborhood in the Indian Ocean region, gatekeeping India out of international organizations, and really the watershed moment of conflict on the border that showed that not only was this relationship competitive, but it can actually lead to military escalation. As a result of which, India has been diversifying and strengthening its partnerships not only with the U.S., but with a number of other countries, including France, Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, Australia, and even the EU.
How do most people in India, I'm curious, feel about the country's involvement in the Quad, which, if you look at a map, essentially looks like an encirclement strategy from China's point of view?
So it's interesting. China's views of the Quad have really oscillated between calling it sea foam that will disappear shortly to the Asian NATO. And the military aspect of the Quad is actually quite exaggerated. But for me, the more interesting question, and also for a lot of people in India, is the broader trend. Why did countries in the region feel the need to revive platforms like the Quad? And the Quad is just one example. There are so many trilateral, minilateral configurations coming up in the Indo-Pacific region. And that is because countries, including India, feel increasingly threatened by China, by the possibility of military aggression, China unilaterally altering status quo, threats of economic retaliation coming out of China as a response to domestic policies of a number of countries, which have really led to this movement that countries are now grouping together in order to ensure that the balance of power is maintained in Asia, that all countries play by the rules, and the region is not dominated by any one country. And I think the Quad is seen within this broader movement.
To what extent do you think a potential Biden administration would change the relationship?
So India is in a sweet spot when it comes to the U.S. elections. No matter who wins, there is an emerging bipartisan consensus that U.S.-India relationship is extremely important. Joe Biden recently remarked that he sees India as a critical partner for maintaining U.S. national security interests. So there is little expectation that there will be any fundamental change in the U.S.-India partnership with the new administration. And the deal that happened today, we need to remember, is a result of almost 20 years of foundation laid down by the bureaucracies of both sides.
Garima Mohan, thank you.
Thank you for having me.